Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday morning or afternoon in Paige's case, and welcome to another episode 4, I believe, of UXR Conversations, the random YouTube show that I do these days because I have so much fun and I literally can't stop talking to amazing researchers and research leaders about a variety of topics that we choose together, and hopefully you find them interesting too. Paige, what's up?
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm happy. All in all, it's a good start to the day to be speaking to you. Thanks for dropping by UXR Conversations.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Um, so I want to introduce you. I want to make some announcements before we dive into the topic. So for those of you who don't know me, and for some reason you're still watching this or here, I'm Noam Siegel. I'm Director of User Research at Wealthfront, and we are honored to be joined by Paige Bennet, who is the Senior User Research Manager at Affirm. And just to share some stuff about Paige, because she's really legit, she's currently managing the consumer research team at Affirm, which is a product I love, by the way, a great place to be. And prior to that, she managed the growth research team at Dropbox, which is, I think, when I started kind of following you and reading your stuff and just getting to know you, I guess. You have also previously run strategic research projects at Medium, and you were the first UX researcher at Weight Watchers, now known, I think, as WW, is it?
That's right.
Yeah, and an amazing part of kind of the health tech ecosystem and weight loss ecosystem. So that's awesome. And you built out the research practice there. So I'm sure you have many tales to tell. But you began your career, this is like the fascinating part, the beginnings of researchers' careers. It's just amazing how many unique stories I've heard. You began yours as a TV news reporter and then moved to the Middle East to conduct research in the Gulf. I am from the
That's
Middle
right.
East. We could probably talk about the craziness that is the Middle East, but maybe we'll avoid that for now. So what we'll actually, so that's Paige, and again, thank you for being here. What we will talk about today is bringing your insights to life, which seems like
Mhm.
a very timely topic given the interesting constraints that we have right now,
Mhm.
or opportunities perhaps in regards to how we work, how we collaborate, and all of that stuff. So before we jump in, a few logistics. First of all, this is an interactive show. Please send us your questions and your comments by commenting on YouTube. I think we have a hello from Vishal, who I don't think ever misses, by the way, any of these. Thank you, Vishal, for always joining live. I really do appreciate it, and everyone else who joins. The second thing is, if you enjoy this content at all and want to read more and watch more, then there are a couple of options. First of all, I have a newsletter these days, which is at uxquest.com. And if you want to subscribe to the paid version, which is a weekly newsletter, just went out today, there's a coupon code, YouTube20, for 20% off of that. Obviously, also on YouTube, and going to have a bunch more conversations and fun videos. So if you want to subscribe and get updates on those, please do. And Paige, are you on Clubhouse?
I am waiting. I want to be on Clubhouse.
Okay, I'll make this happen. Clubhouse is incredible. It has its flaws. I want to acknowledge that, but I've had an amazing experience so far on Clubhouse, both randomly and not randomly connecting with people from all over the world, and just doing more, just having more conversations, more mentorship. I had a really inspiring conversation yesterday with a woman named Sarah, who is the CEO and founder of this amazing construction technology company. I just love it. So follow me on Clubhouse if you want to just join for a random weekend conversation and talk about research. And then finally, if you're looking for me, these are various places I'm at, in case you didn't know this. And if you're looking for Paige, she is on the IG at Paige B and on Twitter at Paige Nomad Girl, which is interesting in and of itself. Do you view yourself as a nomadic person, Paige?
Oh, pre-kids I was. Now I'm a little less nomadic, but in my heart I still am, I think.
Yeah. That said, would you care to share where you're at right now? It is not anywhere near me.
It is. I hope that your weather is much more lovely than my weather is right now. I'm in
It's
Hamburg,
nice.
Germany, so it is cold and very gray. So I hope that you have some sun outside of your window.
We do. You kind of look like you're in like a sauna or something with
I
that wood
know.
behind you.
I do. I look at it. I feel very kind of Lake Tahoe-ish. And
Yeah,
so it is funny. It's a very German home. Yeah,
yeah.
I wish I was in a sauna though. It is bitterly cold this weekend.
Well, I'm jealous for one. I studied German a while back, and I love
Oh.
everything about Germany. So here's the thing. I think we could talk about so many things that don't have anything to do with the theme of the day, but let's jump into it to respect our audience and get them some insights about sharing insights. Um, so let me get us started with a question. I kind of wonder how your thesis about sharing insights has evolved across these different stops in your career.
Mhm.
And what were some of the kind of the hallmarks of insight sharing for you at each of those stops? So I'd love to kind of hear a bit about the research you've been up to in your career, but in the context of how your views evolved about sharing insights.
Yeah. I think as a former journalist, communication has always been the foundation of my craft. It's been something that I am obviously from my journalism days. It was all about my my career. I was only as good of a journalist as I was a communicator. And so when I moved into research, I carried that with me. So in my first few jobs, I would put on the same lens that I would put on as a journalist, which meant when I was preparing my research reports, I was thinking about, okay, who's my audience? What is the context that they may or may not have? What is the reading level they may be on? And I would bring that into my writing. But I have to admit, when I was a young researcher, the emphasis I would put on the sharing your insights part, it was a little less at the beginning. I tended to be completely immersed in the writing the report. And by the time I got to the share out, it was kind of like, okay, let me share via, a PowerPoint in a meeting, and then I'm off to my next project. And what I realized over time is that you have to put as much emphasis on the sharing your insights portion as you do on the gathering your insights portion. And I really realized that when I was at Weight Watchers. So I joined Weight Watchers as their first user researcher. And Weight Watchers was a pretty established company when I joined it. It had been around for decades.
Hmm.
And their CEO at the time was very open to user research, which was great. If any of the fellow researchers out there know that joining a company where the CEO is open to research is already a win. But the company had never really had any experience with user research.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of the first part of my job there educating them. And so with research insights, it took on a whole new level where I not only needed to present what I found in a research report, but I needed to do it in such a way that really taught them about why I went about this the way that I did, how this played into our product roadmap, what for the research we needed to do, because since they were new to research, they did not understand that research often begets further research. And so all of those things came into play. And suddenly I knew I needed to look at how I was sharing my insights on a whole new level. And so I started really thinking about how I could bring them to life. And I put on my journalism lens in that way. And I thought about the narrative. And I looked at, okay, how can I create this narrative that is compelling and then give it to these teams in such a way that they walk out that door and they remember, and they then go and talk about my research with other people because they have been able to understand it so deeply. And so that's really where I would say that that my passion around this subject really started to build, and my work with the sharing the insights portion really started to deepen, was at that
Yeah.
role. And it's evolved since.
Tell us more about the the journalistic lens. I'm wearing this shirt with the number 3. A researcher on the Wellfront team gave it to me as a gift because I have this weird obsession with the number 3, and I think in threes. And you mentioned that from your journalistic background, you always think about 3 considerations: the audience, the context, and the reading level. And I find that interesting. And I also think that a lot of people, researchers who came from, non like classic researchy backgrounds, right? They often feel imposter syndrome, and they feel like maybe they don't belong, or maybe their background is a hindrance to them rather than a superpower. In my view, you being a journalist is absolutely a superpower. So I'm really curious if you could share with us non-journalists a little bit more about those 3 things you mentioned, especially if you still find them, relevant to this day, and you simply kind of built on them.
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think where we're at right now, because most of us are working completely virtually,
Yeah.
it's become even more necessary for us to think in those terms. In journalism school, we would talk about competing with the remote control. You're only one channel away from being turned off. And so when you are giving your story, if you are not doing it in such a way that is compelling and the people really are able to hold on to it, then they're just going to flip to another channel. And now, because we're all on Zoom and we have a million tabs open in our browsers, we're doing the same thing. I am competing with a million different tabs and Slack and a million different things going on in my coworkers' lives. And so I feel like I am back in the studio and I am broadcasting. I am competing with the remote control. And so having those considerations is really paramount. I think in terms of who your audience is, I am not going to deliver my insights to a group of PMs maybe the same way that I would exec leadership or the room of designers or my product marketing managers, because they are all going to do different things with my research. And when I'm giving my recommendations, I need to give it in such a way that I am able to, they're able to take it away and go do with it what that particular team would need to do with it. And I'm speaking to them in a language that they understand. If I'm giving my research findings to the entire company at like an all hands, then I'm going to be approaching it in a much different way than when I'm approaching it by product role or by org. In regards to context, that's really important right now, because if I'm giving a presentation, on Zoom, I only have this hour, and then the attendees are going into a million other Zoom meetings. And how much of what I just told them went in one ear and out the other? And so that hour is precious. There are a few tricks that I call them tricks, but tactics that I now implement, where I provide the context beforehand as much as I can and set that stage so that when we're going into a discussion, that context has already been provided, the foundation has already been laid, and then I can go deep into the subject. An example is jobs to be done. So I recently did a research project where we identified several jobs to be done, and I knew that I was delivering it to a team that had maybe heard of it on a very surface level, but didn't understand it, didn't really know how it could be used, and what some examples of jobs might be. And so I set that context beforehand. I did that education beforehand. And I set a little context in the meeting itself, but by setting the context beforehand and by really considering how much of this would they know, I was able to take advantage of that hour and go deep into those jobs and really talk about, okay, so what does this mean for where we go from here?
How do you set that context, by the way? Do you mean something like a pre-read or something else?
It depends on the subject itself. So I think pre-reads might be okay in certain circumstances. It might be a pre-read where I'm giving them a couple of different examples of jobs and maybe like a quick synopsis to read, or it might be that I give them a few definitions of words that I'll be using. Or maybe I give them, I send them an infographic of some sort. And so it depends on the actual subject, but the context does come somewhat beforehand. And then, of course, at the beginning of the meeting itself.
Yeah.
But I really try to think about how much I would need to give that audience before I dive into the subject itself.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's been really, really important. And then reading level. I think as researchers, we can forget that we can speak researchy to researchers and it might be fine. But again, when you're considering your audience, you need to think about how you best can speak to them. When I was a journalist, we were taught that the average reading level of somebody who's watching the news is not going to be like at a college graduate level. We're talking about third, fourth grade reading level here. And I would oftentimes have these very complex subjects that I was going to talk about. I worked at a TV station on the Gulf Coast. We had Hurricane Katrina, come through when I was in the studio. And afterwards, we were covering the news regarding insurance coverage. And it was a super complicated subject. And I needed to take this super complicated work and really break it down and put it into terms that somebody on a fourth grade reading level would be able to understand. And so I think about that quite often. I think about, how long has this person who's attending this meeting been at this company? How much jargon am I using? How many acronyms am I putting in here that they might not know about? Are they new to their role? Or how new are they to research itself? Have they ever worked with a user researcher before? And how far away do they sit from the research and design org?
Yeah.
And all of those things in mind helps me understand how I can actually write and then ultimately present to their level.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an awesome foundation, I think, for sharing insights, and a few things there that I've never thought about, certainly. I'll just say, by the way, for those of you watching this is a great chance to ask Paige questions if you have any. Please do comment. Don't be shy. Whatever's on your mind, we'd love to answer and we'd love to help. But I want to ask you, Paige, we have to talk about the elephant virus in the room, COVID-19. To your point earlier, it changed everything about how we work. And I find myself confused sometimes about this topic of bringing insight to life, because when I started my Silicon Valley career at Airbnb, Airbnb is such a design-centric company, and every single presentation at Airbnb was so beautiful and well put together. And there was literally a team called, I think, like the story team, that was in charge of making these amazing executive presentations and other things. And it was mind-blowing. I'd go to these weekly or monthly design team meetings, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But interestingly, Airbnb executives were heavily influenced by Amazon, and even we hired people out of Amazon into Airbnb. And also where I work today, Wealthfront, I think we also have quite a bit of influence from Amazon. And at Amazon, Jeff Bezos, who will soon no longer be CEO, became kind of famous for hating presentations, banning presentations from meetings, and instead focusing on documents and on quiet sessions of reading at the beginning of meetings and then discussion on the document. But then there's the fact that we know that people don't read. People don't take the time to read. They're not ingesting things. We're competing for audiences. That's why I love doing YouTube, because for a lot of people, video is more engaging and more fun and a nicer way to learn about things. So I'm just confused, I guess, at this point. And so I think we have to address the core topic here, which is, what are the actual ways that you recommend in this crazy situation we're in these days to bring insights to life? What are the 1, 2, 3, 3 is the magical number, mechanisms that we can use that really work?
Yeah, I think that I think about it in terms of uh, learning. We all learn differently, right? Like you were saying,
Absolutely.
and there are some of us that can read and distill everything and go about our merry way and just be fine, and other people that need to see it taught or need to hear it spoken. And our coworkers are the same way. And a lot of my job as a researcher is to essentially teach my insights to the team so that the recommendations that I am presenting to them are implemented in a way that I believe would be most beneficial. So if the PM doesn't understand the recommendation, or if they forget it, or don't I'm not communicating the importance of it in the appropriate way, and they go on their merry way in their job, how much impact is the work having? And as a researcher, at the end of my project, I am probably coming to it. Hopefully, I've unearthed some insights that I am viewing as like really important for this company to understand, and actions that I believe that we need to go take as a result of these insights and observations. And
Yeah.
so all of that to say that I view our role as we are teachers. We are quasi teachers. And so when I'm presenting, I say presenting, but I don't believe that it always has to take the form of a presentation, nor does it always have to take the form of just a report. Probably all of our companies are going to have us write a report, and that is great. And we want to have that as an artifact for somebody to come along later on and be able to view. And that report hopefully is in depth enough where somebody could come along a year later, read it, and understand what made you approach this project, why you decided to approach it the way you did, what those insights were, and the outcomes of that. However, when you are sharing those insights, I view several different things that you can do. It depends on, I think, budget and resources. There are tactics that you can do that cost nothing and can be done with a team of one. And then there are things that you can do that take a little more effort and require a little more budget. In the virtual world, one of the things I look especially at is the collateral that you create. When we were in a physical office, almost every research project I would do had some sort of collateral to it. So it might have been stickers that I hand out and people put on their laptops. Or
Nice.
maybe it's a poster. Maybe it's a magnet at Medium. I had magnets up in the bathroom. So when you went to the restroom, you could see them. It depended on the office culture. It depended on the actual insight itself. But I wanted something that was in people's faces because I wanted them to remember and have that insight in front of them when the report wasn't open on their desk and when I
Paige,
wasn't with them.
Paige, can I just say, I am not a journalist, but I would not be doing my journalistic duties if, sorry for the double negative that's about to come here, if I did not ask you to please share what was the insight at Medium that was magnetized in the restrooms. I mean, maybe you can't say, but if you remember and you feel like you can share, I've got to ask,
It was regarding our writers, and it was a particular insight about what drove them to write certain types of content. And I can't remember exactly
Okay.
what it was, but it was this very interesting and compelling, like, this is what drives them on this. And we had a nice picture and the insight itself. And I hope that at least the people that went to the bathroom while those are up, that they got a little bit of entertainment. But what was great about that, and what's great about collateral like that, is that it opens it up to people beyond just your team. So people, it maybe in the entire office see it. And as researchers, we should at least want to constantly be building advocates. And part of the way that you build an advocate is by helping your colleagues understand and be able to verbalize those insights to other people. And so what I loved about the stickers is that my team would go into meetings with other people, and those people would ask them, like, tell me about this sticker, which is an illustration of an insight, for example, and they would be able to tell them. Now that we're in Zoom, something I always do is illustrate my insight and create a Zoom background, and I give it to my team to put up as their Zoom background for like a week, for example. So
Oh,
with the jobs that we identified 3 jobs, and I worked with my designer to illustrate 3 illustrations. I gave it to my team. Everyone had it up, and they're in like, my product lead is in exec meetings. My other team is in, all these collaborative meetings, and they're getting asked about their Zoom background. And that gives them this opportunity to talk about the insight. And so, like a student, they're having to verbalize it, so they're learning it a little bit deeper. Plus, that insight is traveling further, and so it becomes this really compelling way to share. And it's, I think, one of the most effective ways to share in a virtual environment. The posters, I can't wait until we're back in the office in person at some point. And I think that when we're able to do, the pretty posters and things like that, that's great. But for now, this is something that is simple. It is free. It costs maybe, depending on what you're wanting to illustrate, it maybe an hour of your time, and it can really be impactful. And so I think of things like that.
I think that's incredible. I think just that one tip, I think is incredible. That's so helpful. Never thought of that sort of idea. That's brilliant in my opinion.
I think the other thing that I really think about is how to involve my audience and get them to interact with the work. And so with Zoom, what I've recommended is that you look at your presentation that you're giving, and you maybe see how you can hone in on a couple of pieces of it. Maybe you don't present the entire research report. You leave your Word doc for that. And you maybe hone in on a couple of pieces of it. And then you set up a presentation so that maybe 30 minutes of it is spent you walking the team through that, and 30 minutes of it is spent with you putting them into breakout rooms where they are discussing the insights. Maybe you can give them a question to react to, or some sort of tiny activity to do, but make them talk about it, get them to discuss it, get them to ask questions about it. They're interacting with it, so they're not just being passive audience members. And I found that really helps in the world that we're in right now,
Yeah.
by getting them to interact.
I wanted to ask you, you are a manager these days, a coach, a mentor, I'm sure, to several people. And I'm curious, kind of, what do you find yourself mentoring people on when it comes to this? Because in case anyone who's earlier in their career watches this, or anyone who's looking, or not early in their career, but looking to level up when it comes to how they share insights, very curious to hear about what you find yourself kind of teaching. You mentioned we're all teachers, I agree. What you find yourself teaching again and again, and maybe that'll give us some inspiration on things that we should be focusing on when it comes to our learning and our development.
I I get people that will tell me things like, I just don't know have the time. And I have so many things that are on my plate, and my PM wants, the minute we finish research on one project, my PM wants me to, test this flow, or I've got to do this other thing, or I don't really have the budget to put up a poster in the office, or I don't even have the time to think about how I'm going to share these. So that's part of what I hear. So I oftentimes talk about, okay, well, part of it is holding ourselves accountable. And so when you're creating that research project brief at the very beginning, and you're looking at the timeline, you put in that timeline time to share. It doesn't have to be a 4-week roadshow. I'm talking about, if you plan a week of share outs in different capacities, plan that week. Think about the collateral that you're going to create beforehand, and in your research brief, put that down. So have that already noted beforehand, and talk to your designer about, okay, We're going to create an illustration of the insights. I'm going to want you to create a Zoom background. Maybe we would create, if you were in the office, we're going to create some flashcards. Or we're going to create a flip book. A researcher at Dropbox created this brilliant flip book that illustrated this very complex finding. And so we talk about the collateral beforehand. I put the time in my calendar, and that brief is, of course, shared with your entire team. So it also helps your partners understand that that time is going to be devoted to share out. So when the time comes, your PM isn't going to be in a place where they're saying, "Oh, I need you to spin up this research project today." And you are saying, but I want to present this share out as a lunch and learn to another part of our team. No, that time is already planned. You've already talked about it with your leads. It's in there. And then the other thing that I coach people on, because I'll get a lot of researchers who especially are maybe the first researcher at their company, or maybe the culture is shifting at their company, that want to know about how to help exec understand that research is necessary and important. And what I find is what they mean by that when I dig into it is they're talking about strategic foundational research. So
Yeah.
oftentimes they're coming from a place where the company is really gung-ho about evaluative research. They will test a flow all day long, but give me the weeks that I need to do a foundational research project. No, you don't have that time. We need you
Yeah.
to test these usability flows. And so I get researchers that will come to me asking about that. And we might not think about bringing insights to life as being related to ultimately helping your company understand the value of foundational research, but it is, because the more you are helping that person to understand deeply, not just the insights, but how you got to them, what further research is an outcome of them, what they need to go do with them. And the more deeply they're understanding that, the more deeply they're able to articulate that, hopefully, the more they are putting those recommendations into place, you're ultimately able to show a result of your work, which is going to give you more leverage to help the company understand why they need to do more foundational work. And so I do view the two as related. And so I will oftentimes talk to younger researchers about that.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's take a quick break from just us talking and bring in the audience. Got a couple of marvelous questions here. So the first is from Vinay. Thank you for your question. How to present insights that might sound like bad news for the business team. So this will happen to every researcher at some point in their career. We find things that could be construed, if not, they are just factually not the best news given our current strategy, direction, and what we're up to. Any ideas on how to deliver that in a way that works?
Yeah, I've been there. Oh my goodness, have I been there?
Yeah.
So I think, first of all, this is where knowing your audience comes into play. So I would look at whether or not I've delivered research to them in the past. Are they familiar with it, with research? Is this an audience that is particularly skeptical, for example, or not? And then I set the context. I talk about, maybe why we did this research, and how research can uncover opportunities that allow us to fix something before it is too late. And so setting context here is helpful. When I go into delivering the news, I always deliver it with the opportunities that it is presented. So it's not just that your CSAT score is abysmal. It's that the CSAT score has unearthed this particular insight, and you believe as a researcher, this is the opportunity that we have to address this issue. And so you're leaving the team with the knowledge that they have the power to go and address this. It is not that everything is awful and that's it, and they just have to close their laptops and walk away. It's that, we unearthed it, which is great news first of all, to know what you are doing wrong is empowering in itself. And then this is the opportunity we have to go to fix that problem. And so I found that when I present it in that context, it does go over a little bit well. Now, depending on who's in your audience, again, you might have people that are a bit defensive, especially if you have the feature creators in there and such. And so I think that's where that context becomes particularly important. And you are presenting it in a way that you are presenting the voice of your of the people that have used that feature or that product, and it's not necessarily your voice. It's not you, the researcher's opinion, and that I found can help break down those defensive walls a little bit. I think all of us understand when we've created something and then we see that somebody's struggling with it, we tend to want to say, well, it's that person's fault. I created a great experience. And so setting that context, I found can also be helpful.
Love it. Thank you. And thank you, Vinay, for the question. That was a great question and so relevant to basically all of us at some point in our career. And then we have another question from Lynn UX or Linux. We always present a very concise executive summary, 2 to 3 slides, before talking about anything else. How can we make the executive summary fun and memorable? Awesome question. Thank you for that, Lynn UX. What do you think, Paige?
Yeah, a couple of things that I've done before and suggest is I think if there is a way to make like a quick Q&A out of your slides, then that's always great. So here's an example of how that looked in person. I would present like a couple of slides, and then I would ask the people in my audience. I would do a question. I might even do this at the beginning before I present anything, where it's like, what's the percentage of our user base that you think never creates an account? And in person, I would sometimes even pass out little hands, cut out hands, and they would hold them up. In Zoom world, I asked them to raise their hand or do a thumbs up, and so I'm getting them interacting, and I might do something like that with a couple of slides before I go any more into the presentation, where I'm just getting them to react and also to get the wheels spinning in their mind of like what would the percentage of our user base be that doesn't ever create an account or falls off before this point. So that's always super fun. Opening with a particularly impactful audio clip or video clip that illustrates the point that you are then going to make can be quite impactful. Yeah. And so I think that's something that you could also play around with.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you both for terrific questions, and keep them coming, by the way. If you have any more questions, would love to hear. You talked, and I think an article you wrote or somewhere I saw, about the notion of whether people have ingested the insights. I'm kind of curious to ask you. I think you triggered me in a good way with the mention of jobs to be done. Is the job ever done of sharing insights? Do they get kind of ingested at some point? And if that's the case, how do you know that happened? Because I think, we as researchers, we're putting all this effort into these creative methods to bring insight to life. I think we kind of want closure. We want to know that that's it. They all got it. We can move on. I'm not sure that ever happens, but what's your take on kind of ingesting insights, and when is the job done, if ever?
I don't know if the work is ever completely finished, oftentimes because it is tied to further work. However, I think that there are moments when you can consider little wins. And so I think I was in a meeting, I give this example. I was in a meeting, and there was somebody on a team that I worked with, but not on my direct team. And we were talking about something, and that person voiced the insight from my work to the room. not even knowing that I was necessarily the researcher on that project. They were talking about something, and the person said, you know what, we learned that this happened, and I think that we should consider XYZ.
Yeah.
And that to me was such a win, because that research project wasn't even directly related to this team. That person wasn't even my immediate team member that I was working with.
Yeah.
And they understood the insight and the context in which it lived, and they were able to then regurgitate it back to another team. And that to me was an example of having at least done my job in explaining it well and bringing it to life for that person. And so I think I definitely look at that. I think even though our work might never be truly finished, we can look at whether or not our team members have comprehended the insights and understand and are putting into play the recommendations as a measurement of how well we have done.
Yeah.
And so I definitely look at that component of it.
I love that point about kind of mentions of your research in the wild as being a great example, especially if these people aren't very directly tied to you organizationally. It's a great example. It's a bit like how I get to speak to a lot of, I'm sure you do too, to a lot of founders and people working in tech. And it's always a special moment when you see the thing you built out in the wild being, people are on their phone with the thing you made. It's such a sign that it's going places, it's succeeding. So I
Yeah.
love that. And Vinay asked another question here, which I think pertains to what we just talked about, and which is kind of what follows an insights meeting, so to speak. Do we need to follow up with stakeholders on what happened with the insights, or does our part end at the insights presentation or whatever it is? I feel like there's a lot of discussion around this. It's kind of a heated topic. Should researchers make recommendations or not? Should researchers check on the recommendations and whether they're being implemented or not? Are you willing to die on that hill today? What's your
Oh, in my humble opinion, what I have found can also help a team and company understand the impact and how research can be impactful, is by understanding what happened to that work. And so where did it go? Those research insights can't just die off. If they do, then I don't believe, in my opinion at least, that we have really done our job. And so when I give those insights to the team, they need to go do something with them, most likely. And so I want to be able to follow that in an effort not just to I think help the team understand, what more we could do with these insights, but also because I am, like I said, I'm constantly trying to think about how I'm making more advocates. I'm constantly trying to think about how research can help build out company strategy and how research's impacts can be viewed. And so understanding and following those insights being implemented in some fashion helps me do all of those things. I think when I write about sharing insights, I write about the importance that, especially with your immediate team, you're not just doing a research project, tying it up in a pretty bow, sharing your insights, but you're actually bringing them into your process through the entire project.
Yeah.
And so when your work starts there and it doesn't start just at the end, I think you're able to do that a lot more effectively. And so I've given the example before of doing different workshops with your insights with your team. So you're helping them work through it, and that comes before you ever give an official presentation. I've talked about doing like a synthesis exercise with them, which happens obviously before you give a formal presentation. I've talked about doing things like what I call dispatches from the field, and all of these things are take place either at the beginning or when you are conducting your research, and your team is right there with you. And so they're starting to distill, they're starting to understand little by little some of what is coming out of your work before you ever even get to the formal part of your work. I do want to throw out a caveat here. You always want to, again, provide that really important context. So when I write up what I call a dispatches from the field, which I do especially when I do like field work, or if I have, like, let's say, a multi-week diary study. And it's just a way for me to share little bits of pieces of information as they become available. I always set context. I don't want a PM or designer to read this dispatches from the field and then go change the entire company's strategy based on 2 days of a diary study. However, I want them to be in the process with me. So it's definitely a balance. But it's one that I think is worth it.
Yeah. I have a couple more questions for you, and we will be ending soon. So if anyone in the audience has questions, please send them over before it's too late. So my first question to you is, I'm not going to make you choose your favorite child. That's not fair. I know you have a couple, but I will ask you to choose your favorite sharing methods, your favorite, just the one thing that you absolutely love. It brings you joy. It works so well. If you could only share insights for the rest of your career in one way, what would it be?
I call it an exhibit share out. And it is simply a way to, when you think about a museum exhibit, for example, and you're standing in front of a piece of art and you're able to reflect on it, it's where you take your insights and you position them in such a way in your office to where people can come in and distill them and reflect on them. It's different than just a piece of collateral. So an example I'll give is we did our first round of international research at Dropbox. And it was a really big deal because we hadn't done this particular research in a long time. And so when we came back, we really wanted to make sure that people were not just understanding but excited. So we printed out the insights in such a way that they were like art. We put them around the room. We had, drinks. And we called it the title of our project, and made it to where it was just like a happy hour. So we didn't ask anything of attendees except to come in, walk around the room, have a drink, and ask us questions if they have any. And it was so impactful because people from different teams got to come in and view it, who wanted more research like the kind that we did. People also got to reflect on different parts of the insights that really made a connection with them. And they did it in a way that felt very casual because we weren't asking them to do anything particular. And so that I think I found real success with. And you can do it on any budget, and you can make it fit your particular office culture. It's one of my favorites. Like I said, I really miss being like in a room with my coworkers. And so I really look forward to the day in which I get to do that again. So yeah, I love what I call exhibit share outs.
That's great. We're just going to do one final question and then end for the day. We're both parents, and we have both publicly spoken or written about how parenting has influenced our lives and the way we do research specifically. So I'd love to ask you, what have you learned from your children in the context of sharing insights with the teams you're part of?
Oh, wow. I think that what I've learned from my children is to always look below the surface at what is driving them to act the way they do. So I have a 3-year-old, and when he is throwing a fit about something, very rarely is it actually about that particular toy. There's a bigger reason why he's throwing a fit. It's because he didn't get enough sleep last night, or he really wants the toy because his brother had it and he's feeling a lot of competition with him. If
Yeah.
I don't address that driver, I'm not going to really be able to fix the problem. And so I have to find out, like, what is that driver. I knew this before becoming a parent a little bit, but becoming a parent has absolutely deepened this for me. And it just, like, every day I'm interviewing participants, I am going back to this example and thinking, like, what is that driver? Because this, what they're saying is just surface, and and my job is to figure out that deeper driver that's propelling them. And so that has really, I think that's really propelled my passion for this subject too, because my work is about figuring out that driver and then bringing that to life for my team. And so they might not get to be, on the field with me at that moment or in a call with me at that moment. Some are observing, but not everybody does. And so I need to bring that to life as much as possible. So I think that's definitely an outcome of of having a toddler, at least. Also, like, knowing how to speak to them. Oh my gosh, knowing your audience. Like, I can't talk to my 3-year-old like I can talk to my friend's 6-year-old. I have to really understand how to communicate to him. And
Yeah.
so it makes the whole house a lot happier if if I can better understand how to talk to him. So yeah, that's definitely influenced my work.
That's awesome. Paige, this was delightful, but we have to end. Vinay, I saw that you asked some questions. Please send them to Paige directly if you'd like, or to me, and
Absolutely.
we'll try to get to them. Paige, first of all, if you're looking for Paige, and you should be, then she's on Instagram and Twitter. You can see below. But Paige, is there anything else you wanted to share or plug that you're up to, or anything else you wanted to mention before we finish?
So I'm really passionate about this subject. I'm so passionate about this subject that I am in the very early stages of putting together a book about our research narrative. So I'll be connecting with the research world on this because I really want to hear from other researchers on, what they're struggling with, what they found worked, what they found hasn't. And so that's a journey that I've just started. And yeah, if you ever want to reach out to me or connect with me, I love connecting with other researchers. I think that there's no joy as much as talking to a researcher and, like, hearing their story and us all just kind of becoming giddy over getting to do this, for getting paid for this. It's just so much fun. I love it. So yes, look forward to connecting with everyone.
That's awesome. That book is very exciting news, what you just shared. What an amazing thing to soon be a published author. Or are you already, besides your journalistic life, a published author?
I guess I could say my news days maybe, and I wrote a lot on
Well,
Medium before I worked for them,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
this will be my first book, so I'm
yeah,
looking
yeah.
forward to it.
That's amazing. I think we need a lot more books in the realm of UX research specifically.
Mhm.
My friend Greg Bernstein, you might know him.
Yes.
He just took on the role of lead researcher at Webflow. He just published an amazing book with perspectives from a bunch of user researchers. If the people watching this haven't gotten that book, you should. It's awesome. Full disclosure, I am also in that book. Paige, are you in that book as well?
I'm not in that book,
You're not
but
in the book, right?
I'm not in the book, but I do think it's a great book. So even
It's
if I'm not in it,
it's a
yeah.
good book, and whenever Paige's book comes out, I will certainly be pre-ordering it. Thank you so much, Paige. This was a ton of fun. I'm
Thank
so glad we
you.
got to connect finally. Enjoy your time in Germany and Hamburg. That sounds awesome. I
Thank
wish I could
you.
travel there as well. And for everyone watching, thank you as always for your questions, for taking the time to watch. I hope this was insightful and helpful for you in bringing your insights to life. Please subscribe and follow, because there's so much more to come. my passion right now is just finding every avenue possible to share more knowledge and have fun and build up the UX research community and mentor and coach and teach. And I will not stop because it's fantastic. And I hope you enjoy it too. Have a lovely Sunday. Bye, everyone, and see you next time on UXR Conversations.